Hey friends, thanks for joining me, and welcome to episode 90 of In Too Deep. I'm your host, Jack Rowland. Today I am joined by the delightful and fascinating Frederick Brennan. Much of his story is outlined really well in the 6-part HBO documentary called Q Into the Storm, which I highly recommend everyone watches. But in case you've missed it, I'll quickly fill you in. Fred is a computer programmer who in 2013 created the infamous image board website called 8chan. The concept of 8chan was almost a combination of 4chan and Reddit, where its users can post images and comment completely anonymously, making it a home for unregulated free speech. After a swift boom in popularity, the website became too much for Fred to manage, so he sold 8chan to Jim Watkins after being approached by his son Ron Watkins, and continued on as an admin for the site. A few significant things happened with 8chan. It became a breeding ground for racists, white supremacists, and radicalization, as well as becoming the exclusive platform for a mysterious figure known as Q to post, giving rise to the Qanon conspiracy movement. Fred saw the writing on the wall and distanced himself from the website and the Watkins, as he believed 8chan and their management of the website was becoming increasingly harmful to society. Shortly after, 8chan was under heavy scrutiny as it was the platform chosen by the shooter responsible for the Christchurch massacre, killing 51 Muslims and injuring 40 more, to post his manifesto, and similar circumstances with the shooter responsible for the El Paso mass shooting. Aside from the increasing problem of racist echo chambers, the QAnon movement grew quickly, becoming a cult-like movement followed by millions, and even started to have real-life effects on American politics. Although Fred was even accused of being Q in the early days, it is widely speculated, not proven, that Q is in fact Ron Watkins. Fred decided to go to war with the Watkins in an attempt to get 8chan taken offline. After making life very problematic for the shady father-son duo, Fred ultimately had to flee his home in the Philippines due to a libel case from Jim Watkins, which could have landed Fred with a minimum of 6 years in a Filipino prison. Due to the nature of his disability, it's safe to say it would have been a death sentence. All that aside, Fred also designs and creates fonts and offers much of his software programs for free. This chat I'm also joined by my buddy Owen Hughes, who has been my window into the Quniverse and has been following this saga closely since it began. Alright, let's get to it. Please welcome to the show, Owen Hughes and Frederick Brennan.
Is there a point to all this?
I think we're getting in too deep. You don't apply. Bad luck.
Well, I have one speed, I have one gear. Go, 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 go.
I'll tell you when we're getting in too deep.
Keep going. So it's kind of evolved into a lot of Q talk as well. I was covering flat earthers earlier on, but they're yesterday's news now. So
Are they?
I don't know. Maybe not.
I guess in many ways they are yesterday's news, but they still, amazingly, every once in a while are able to rope in a celebrity, and that's usually what causes them to kind of gain in traction.
Yeah, they'll have like one
recognized.
like an uptick. Was it like Tila Tequila or whatever?
Yeah.
Right, like they always try to get rappers or sports stars, you know?
Totally.
Scientology.
I'm joined with Owen. How you doing, buddy?
Good, mate. Good to be back.
And internet royalty, Frederick Brennan. Hey, Fred. How you going?
I'm doing okay. I don't know if I'm internet royalty, but
I think you've definitely earned the title, mate.
At this stage.
Yeah. So, man, thank you so much. It's so great to talk to you. I've listened to so many kind of podcasts with you on. The one with Duncan was great. Obviously, the Q Into the Storm documentary was just fantastic. And you are such a interesting, likable, mischievous guy. I think it's always enjoy hearing the things you have to say, buddy.
well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know that I've done that many podcasts recently, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for making the time for us. I thought I'd just kind of like kick it off with, last that I really, apart from Duncan's podcast, it was the Q doco that I kind of really was keeping track. So I just watched episode 5 again, which is the escape from the Philippines, which just gave me a huge amount of anxiety for you. That just looks like one of the most stressful ordeals anyone would have to go through. I'm just kind of wondering what is life like for you after that escape and a massive relocation and readjustment to your life?
Well, first I would say that people often ask me if Cullen lied about any of the portrayal of that episode, and no, he didn't. Everything that he says happened did happen that way.
Wow.
I know that it seems kind of reality TV, and that he might have tried to stretch the truth on some things, but he didn't. The power really went out in his building, so he had to trudge down a bunch of stairs with his suitcases. We really did miss a flight. The warrant really was filed at noon, and we really did get out, an hour or so before. So all of the core details are correct.
Wow.
We didn't miss a flight because we were late. We missed it because obviously immigration rejected us the first time, and then we had to get into a car and go to another terminal. That was the advice that we were given, which turned out to be good advice because apparently, at least at that time in Ninoy Aquino International Airport, the main airport in Manila, the terminals, the immigration officials don't talk to each other.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Really convenient.
Very convenient for me. I don't know if they're gonna,
Yeah.
they would probably view this as a huge failing in their security, and they'll probably change it. But
Are they
yeah,
still after you?
depends on how you define after you, right? Because there is no extradition authority for this type of charge. The Philippines does have extradition authority for serious charges like murder,
Right.
a rape, that kind of thing, where let's say a foreigner tries to go there and commit an act like that. And then they're thinking that they could just go back to their country and not face anything. That's not true.
Right.
Like, if the police figures it out, they can, go into a U.S. federal court through their embassy, ask for this person back. But their cyber libel statute, despite the fact that in the Philippines it's considered a serious crime that is charged above a lot of their other crimes, it's charged 6 to 12 years in prison, 6 minimum.
So ridiculous.
Because of the Speech Act of 2010 in the U.S., they aren't allowed to extradite for cyber libel. So they are not able to request a legal extradition.
Fuck yeah.
And obviously the Philippines is not like Israel or something. They don't have like a Mossad that they can just,
Yeah.
like you get people out of the country illegally. I don't know if you know about that case where Mossad actually got a private jet and decided they wanted to try somebody in Israel. That's a really interesting case. Obviously, even if, I wouldn't rise to that level, but
Didn't they use New Zealand passports? I think they had New Zealand passports, and it was like a diplomatic, like a scandal. Like New Zealand was really pissed
off. It was
off.
something crazy. Yeah. I remember that, and the guy that they arrested is in Israeli jail now. So, but anyway, so I guess they're still after me, sort of. I mean, if I were to go back there, I would be arrested. I know that. I'm on the immigration watch list as having a hold departure order. So if I were to go back there, I would be detained right away at the airport. But as long as I don't go back there, there's nothing they can do, and there are no more active hearings in the court. The court basically postponed the case until either I go back there or forever. Basically, and if I were to die before then it would never get reopened. So
yeah, and there's nothing they can do in the States. Like, there's no way that any of that shit would fly.
No, the Speech Act of 2010. Even if that law didn't exist, it would be very hard for them to get an extradition. But that law specifically forbids them from getting an extradition, so they wouldn't even file to try to get one.
So, I mean, kind of the way, thinking about your situation of Jim Watkins basically taking you to court for calling him senile, which, according to his own philosophy of freedom of speech, it's quite contradictory in itself. But nonetheless, kind of thinking about it more, also seeing how it's kind of portrayed through the documentary. I mean, essentially, given your condition that you were born with, it seems like it was more or less kind of indirectly a legal hit put out on you, right?
I view it that way. Yeah, I think that he was hoping that I would be detained at this facility called the Bureau of Immigration Bicutan Detention Center, which is a holding facility for foreigners that are accused of a whole bunch of different things. Either they are accused of breaking a Filipino law, and so they're held there rather to make sure that they don't escape the country, because even if the Philippines doesn't allow like a foreigner to fly out of the country, they're still worried that if they don't detain foreigners accused of breaking Filipino law, that there are obviously a lot of ways out of the country that aren't, and not all of them are like fully legal, passport stamp, that kind of thing. First of all, the immigration officials are quite corrupt, so they could allow a foreigner to fly out that's not supposed to be allowed to, and not stamp their passport. Another thing that could happen is if you travel to the south of the country, the border with Malaysia is very porous. Boats are always going, like it's always in the news there. Like they'll always talk about Filipinos that got arrested in Malaysia working, or Malaysians getting arrested in the Philippines for doing crimes, or that's where the Abu Sayyaf is, which is a branch of the Islamic State that at one time it took over a city in the Philippines, but now it's, I'm pretty sure, defeated. But I don't know obviously I haven't lived there in a long time, so I don't keep up with the local news as much as I used to. But yeah, so anyway, to cut a long story short, they want to detain pretty much any foreigner that's accused of breaking their laws at Bicutan until their case is heard, which can be years and years and years. So I don't know that I would have made it more than a week in BI Bicutan, because it's a hugely overcrowded facility. It's only supposed to hold, like, I believe the official number is 110 foreigners, but it holds over 400. It's just like a one-room area with they call it there a tarpaulin on the ceiling. So there is really no ceiling. It's just a tarp, and obviously there's no air conditioning. BI Bicutan inside is run by a Korean gang.
Bloody hell.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy because some foreigners actually paradoxically want to stay in Bicutan. So these Korean criminals that run the facility really, they bribe all of the officials. They are what's called pay to stay. So they pay the immigration officials to slow down their deportation. So because they know that if they get deported back to Korea or China in some cases, they will face very serious charges, and they won't be able to have the kind of lifestyle that they have in Bicutan, where they're allowed to have prostitutes and use computers and phones. And there are apparently a few air-conditioned rooms that are supposed to be for the employees of the Bureau of Immigration, but these rooms are actually, in a corrupt way, being used as cells for basically the kingpins of that place.
It sounds a bit like the jail in Marching Powder in Bolivia.
Yeah,
it's just kind of a bit of a free for all.
Yeah. I mean, the Philippines scare the hell out of me. Like, it looks so beautiful, but I mean, Duterte just sounds like a maniac. Didn't he compare himself to Hitler?
He did, and the crazy thing is, when I first went there, he wasn't in power, so I got to see his rise to power, and he's claiming that he's going to allow an election, but I don't know.
I don't know either.
He's supposed to be out of power next year. There's supposed to be an election, but I'm thinking he's going to do something like what Vladimir Putin did.
Oh, for sure.
Where one of his kids, because she would be the front runner, Sarah Duterte, is going to hold the title, but he is still going to be actually in power. Kind of like when Putin allowed Medvedev, right, to hold the title, but he was still actually in power. That's what most people that watch the Filipino politics are thinking is going to happen. the only candidate that has any chance of beating them is Leni Robredo, the current vice president, because in the Philippines, president and vice president are elected separately and usually are from alternate parties. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of like kind of like Suharto. Is it Suharto or Sukarno in Indonesia? Like the family held power for quite a long time. Anyway,
yeah, it's something like that. And this is very common in the Philippines. Actually, it just never occurred on the they don't call it federal there; they call it national. It's not a federal system, but on the national level, there never was a family that held power like this. They don't have a history of dynastic rule at the national level. They do at the provincial level. It's very, very common for the provinces to be totally captured by a certain family.
Okay.
But now, Duterte's changed.
Yeah, I mean, he scares the hell out of me, honestly.
Well, he should. I mean,
yeah.
I could tell you so many crazy things about him. Like, first of all, he's totally a hypocrite. He has admitted to a Filipino reporter that he uses fentanyl himself.
No shit.
Like prescribed fentanyl from a doctor. But still, yet he's this anti-drug crusader while most of the time he's giving speeches, he's probably as high as I am. Like, what is... I don't know. I would just say that knowing what that drug is, having used it for chronic pain, probably the same reason that he's convinced this doctor to give it to him, right? I would never trust myself to be like a president of a country. It's way too important of a job.
Yeah.
For you to be high as fuck while you're trying to do it.
It's pretty common though, don't you find, like the people that rail the loudest against certain things, like whether it be like homophobes or like drugs or
right. It's something they hate about themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, speaking of drugs, Fredrick, I'd love to ask you, I don't know how detailed you'd like to be, but I heard that you created the entire idea for 8chan on a mushroom trip. Is that correct?
That's true.
Are you able to kind of give us some kind of, what was the mushroom trip like? Was this kind of like a real visionary kind of quest, or was it more just like an out-of-the-box idea?
I feel like psychedelic trips are... Well, first of all, they're misunderstood by a lot of society. They tend to be very, if you have like what's called a good trip versus a bad trip. Like, if you have a good trip, they tend to be very kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They tend to be very supportive of whatever path you're on in life, right? So because before I founded 8chan, I was already an image board admin. I was Wizardchan's admin. So it was kind of like I already had all of this life experience. So what I would have been thinking about while tripping, they tend to be supportive of whatever path you're on. So I, at that time, was, had just left Wizardchan, of course, because I wasn't Origin anymore. So I wanted to start another image board, but I didn't know what it should be about. And that was kind of a problem that I was struggling with. Like, I had a few ideas, but I definitely didn't want to start a site that wouldn't be very technically different than all the other ones. I was mostly in it for the technical aspects, which makes me different than some other image board admins. I wanted, it to be very technically impressive. So I had the idea on that mushroom trip to basically combine a site that most image board users hate. And I think that probably being under the influence of this psychedelic drug was what allowed me to kind of break through that kind of conditioning, right? And not think of something like this, because it's something that obviously is hated. Image board users hate Reddit. It's very well known. But to kind of break through that conditioning and be like, well, try it anyway. So that's when I came up with the idea of basically user administered boards. And that's how 8chan was created. Obviously, the Watkins family would end up.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good psychedelic story, but it also gave birth to a beast that you couldn't control, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
But it does sound
I really
visionary
trusted the wrong
too.
people because when I look back, I really was not so interested in being an image board admin. Like, I was more interested in all of this technical aspects, and I think that I I really viewed what was going on around. Like, I viewed myself as like a free software developer, and so for me, 8chan was just a free software project, and I was never that concerned with making sure that I would maintain ownership, that it would always have the same domain, or those kinds of things. I was thinking, like, I want to make sure that this software does well, and that this idea of user administrated boards, for me, what would have been ideal would be if 4chan would have just adopted my user administrated boards idea. So, yeah, I clearly viewed it all wrong, and I didn't really understand that these communities kind of have a life of their own, and they need somebody that's very socially adept, which I really am not.
It's a really strange culture, isn't it? The kind of strange for me, who's not really immersed in it. Probably very familiar for I don't know, you or the average kind of Chan user. But yeah, I mean, through all this QAnon drama that's unfold, and that you've for a period of time really made it your mission to kind of take down the Watkins and get 8chan offline. Are you now in the kind of, I guess, the Chan culture? Are you an enemy of these people? Is it divided? Like, where does your kind of where do you sit in it in this online culture these days?
Well, I don't really use image boards that much anymore, but
Right.
Even though some image board users might consider me as their enemy, I don't necessarily see myself that way. I definitely see myself as the enemy of the Watkins family.
Yeah.
Jim Watkins, Ron Watkins. But
and we're grateful for
I
that.
also, at the same time, have the opinion that 4chan, the largest image board, is run pretty well for what it is. And given that there is a demand for this kind of website, their rules seem to work well. And, I figure that it would be such an abridgment on people's freedom of speech to not allow any image board at all, that at least you should have ones that are run in a responsible way. For example, 4chan banned talking about Q, they banned Gamergate, they banned all sorts of things. And despite the fact that even at its peak, when the Christchurch shooting happened, 8chan was 10 times smaller than 4chan. So there was something uniquely bad about the Watkins' administration abilities that caused that tragedy, because similar tragedies have never happened in 4chan's history. The largest shooting directly connected to a 4chan user happened in 2010. And I can't remember that many details about it, but obviously it led to a whole bunch of crackdowns and a ton of changes in their internal systems to make sure that it just wouldn't recur. But meanwhile, 8chan was well known by its users that the Watkinses had a very laissez-faire policy, that they essentially considered themselves chaos merchants, that Ron Watkins' motto was embrace infamy, embrace chaos, that kind of thing. So they knew that even though the Watkins family would never come out and say this, that they viewed mass shooting events as broadly positive for their website.
Good
as
publicity.
in terms of right. In terms of publicity, in terms of making it more edgy, in terms of attracting more users that want to see the most extreme content online. And so
that's so fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. So they will never run 8chan in a responsible way, like, Hiroyuki with 4chan. They just got stuck at image board administration.
I was really
like complex art.
Yeah, I was really been thinking about the the deep down motivations of the two of those people, and I was it strikes me with Jim that the kind of war that you were waging on 8chan was personal in the sense that it was affecting his bottom line, and maybe he's just a bit spiteful that his ex-employee was making his life more difficult, but it.
Well, obviously, I oppose everything he stands for, like his fascism.
Yeah, totally.
And his, belief in the fact that we need a fascist military coup, and his, administration of 8chan, such as to cause people to carry one out. I obviously oppose him totally, but I don't think the image boards necessarily need to lead to that. And 420chan and 4chan show that they don't. When they're administered differently, that. Sure, they still have a lot of negative consequences, but, people aren't dying in vast numbers, and our politics aren't getting totally fucked with. So.
Yeah. It's like, I was just more also just thinking about the difference in the motivations overall between Jim and Ron. Like, in terms of not only the image board, but like in terms of their approach to you. And it seemed to me that Ron, it's like, I feel like you kind of in a way hurt his feelings, like on top of the, getting into, 8chan business and, whatever. It seems like, taking away his kind of golden goose that he was, using to try to gain infamy and influence on top of money and all that kind of stuff. That seemed to me to be a really prime motivator. Well,
I mean, I'd agree with that. It definitely hurts his feelings for me to say, you're terrible at administrating an image board, and Hiroyuki is way better at it than you. Yeah. Which is essentially my position, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting hearing you say that they're agents of chaos, because re-watching Q Into the Storm and just kind of really just thinking about how they say that they're free speech absolutists, and we've already gone through the example of him trying to pin you down on defamation or whatever. But I guess my kind of trying to understand the Watkins, they claim to be free speech absolutists. Then why do they push free speech to the absolute limit, making it so problematic that authorities ended up having to feel the need to deal with it? And I think that was actually probably more their goal, was actually trying to push free speech to the limits where it would have to be censored, completely doing free speech a massive disservice.
Yeah, and that's...
And I think that I kind of concluded that I believe they're maybe more Jim. His objective is actually chaos.
Right, and that's a great point, and that's the point that I also make when I talk to people like Josh Moon, owner of the Kiwi Farms, that he claims to be this free speech absolutist and that he's doing free speech this great service by running the Kiwi Farms. But because of his totally unbending ideological view towards, his role and the purpose of the Kiwi Farms and his service, all of that, same as Jim Watkins, they are unable to just bend in the smallest ways to ultimately preserve free speech online by making authorities less interested. Like, if we think of Moon, the reason that the Kiwi Farms were ultimately lost, I believe that they're now being hosted by Nick Lim, same guy that, is hosting 8kun. I believe that that's the case, or something with the domain or something like that. I haven't really looked deeply into it, but in any way, the point is this, that you're totally right, that it's all about attention, and it's all about also signaling to their users that they have these beliefs. It's really about pragmatic, ways of actually defending free speech in the here and now. It's all about just their users calling them based and being like, oh, even though it was super hard, you've done this sacrifice for us. Like, they want to be seen by their user bases, like Jesus Christ, really, like that, all the people just don't understand their extreme conviction in free speech. But when you actually look at the issues that they're, the hills that they're deciding to die on, they're ridiculous hills. Like, in the case of Watkins family, the hill that they, decided to die on was, allowing somebody to pretend to be a government agent on their website, IEQ. Well, that's, what they said to the world. But in reality, I feel like Ron was posting. And I think maybe even Jim didn't know.
That's what I think as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was messy.
Interesting.
Because Jim seems to me to be like he's not that kind of in tune with.
He's super aloof as well, and he's not good with
that's
computers.
Jim Watkins.
Jim Watkins is a
creepy
very
voice.
aloof guy, and he is just, I don't know, like, he is so difficult to talk to, and I feel like he is manipulated constantly by Ron Watkins, that Ron Watkins, having grown up with Jim, knows all the buttons to push on him to kind of get the actions that he wants taken. Like, for example, the entire reason that Jim owns 8chan right now in the first place is because Ron Watkins reached out to me, right? And he convinced his dad to do this. So Ron is really, I feel, the one that's actually in charge of Jim's empire. Like, Jim is the one that has his name and everything, and he is, he believes he's in charge, right? Let's put it that way. One of the fascinating things that I remember about working there was that oftentimes Ron would convene meetings between him, myself, and Tom. And the entire purpose of the meeting was to figure out how to trick Jim into believing something.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah, because we knew that otherwise Jim would make an extremely bad decision. So we would produce false reports. We would lie, flat out lie, and Ron would just make sure that we all knew what the cover story for Jim was about a certain thing. Like,
oh man,
that
makes so much sense. That makes so much fucking sense to me, because like I've always thought that, or not always, but really started to dawn on me that without a doubt in my mind that Ron was the one posting as Q from the beginning of 2018. Maybe the first poster,
I believe that too.
Yeah, like maybe the first poster was that South African dude, which is why he seems so like adamant that he knows that Q isn't Q at the time.
Paul Ferber.
Yeah, but it makes so much sense that Ron's or like not only running a game on like the Q boards and like everyone that reads the post, but he's running a game on his dad as well.
I believe Ron Watkins is a psychopath. I have just seen how easily he lies to people, that it's nothing.
He strikes me as a bad liar too. Like, he's not convincing, at least in the documentary.
Honestly, yes. Yeah, he's not super convincing, but he also is. It just comes so easily to him to lie that
he enjoys
he's not convincing. Just the constant repetition and the fact that he will never, bend on a lie, right? Like even at the end of the documentary when he accidentally said that he's been doing this for years, right? He still did not. Like, he just has no shame. That's the real thing. Where he's just a totally shameless guy. Like, another thing is, like, why I believe this is his infidelity to his wife. Like, he will claim to her all the time that he's turned over a new leaf and isn't cheating anymore. And then he will just go right back to cheating. And he learned that from his dad, by the way. But they're just so similar in that way. The way that they are just so that it just comes naturally to him to lie about things like this. And I mean, had I been in charge of 8chan at the time that he went there, I would have banned him. I would have made the case to the user base that he represents a legal threat, and, history would have been totally different.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely would have been. Like, there's been so much shit that has happened since, Q started posting. Like, I just, go back to, 2018, 2019.
Well, that's why the Watkinses didn't want me involved in any 8chan decisions in the in the 2 years that I was there, and I wasn't involved in 8chan's day-to-day. I would still opine on it, and
Yeah, this guy seems to have morals. He's got to take him down.
yeah,
get rid of this
they
guy.
wanted me. They wanted me as far away from that as possible. Like, Jim also runs 2channel, and ultimately that's what caused me to leave. I don't know if it's gone over in the documentary. I feel like it's not going over as well, like why I actually quit, because obviously Cohen shows up like when the decision's already been made, right? So, and when I'm like, yeah, he shows up early, but he shows up like when I've decided I'm leaving. So
I think it's presented more as like when he busted into the house is more like the presentation of when, the final straw for you.
Yeah, but not really, because the reason he busted into the house was because I was talking about quitting. Yeah, so what precipitated that was they already knew that I thought 8chan was a failed project. I resigned from it in 2016. But as soon as I resigned, Jim Watkins didn't want me to leave the Philippines. And so he offered me the role of writing software for 2channel, his Japanese site, which is basically like just keep him in the company, put him as far, far away from 8chan as possible, right? Like make him work on a site in a foreign language even. Yeah. So,
but you learned kanji, right? Like you learned Japanese, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would say I'm intermediate in Japanese now, which, yeah, that's exactly part of the problem, because when I was learning Japanese, like I had always been interested in learning the language, but now that I had this work excuse to really buckle down and figure it out, I came to the conclusion that they stole 2channel. And when I confronted them about this, so I got there was a court decision that was made, I believe in 2017, and it was posted by Hiroyuki, but only in Japanese. And so I took this court decision and I secretly paid like $150 or something to have it translated on gengo.com, which is just a place where you can submit any text and have it translated. And so I got back this English translation of the court decision, and it infuriated me that they had lied to me for so long about having created 2channel and being its rightful owners, when the Tokyo District Court is like, well, you know what? Actually, this is stolen property, and Jim, you owe so much money, right? And the only reason that it was thrown out in the Supreme Court was just because the Supreme Court of Japan was just because there was no legal contract. And so the Supreme Court decided that even though Hiroyuki's right, that there's just no way to compel. And anyway, the crazy thing is, it wouldn't matter because of this like Jedi mind trick bullshit that they did, where they renamed 2channel to 5channel, but they redirected the domain that they stole, 2ch.net, 5ch.net. And then they also got all of the browser apps, people that developed the browser apps for Android, OS X, Windows. They got all of those people to basically swear fealty to Jim by giving them a cut of the ad revenue. And because 2channel was already stolen, and so it was the largest, site, they could offer way more money than Hiroyuki could. So it was like, as long as they were able to keep it stolen for 6 months, they were able to finally, move the site. And then now that they've moved it to the domain 5ch.net, a domain that they own the trademarks for, that's why Ron went to Japan originally, to go and trademark the trademark Go Chanaru, which means channel in Japanese, so that they are basically totally legally insulated, even though morally they stole it. Like,
It's so shady. It's so shady and insidious. Like, what
right.
a bunch of scumbags.
I totally agree, and that's why I quit
Yeah.
way back in 2018, because I just couldn't, in good conscience, like when I knew, you know, and what still pisses me off to this day was Ron Watkins's answer to my claims. And all he said was that, like, he just made it about my job security, or like the security of me being able to live in the Philippines. And his immediate answer to me was, well, Fred, you don't have to worry. Hiroyuki is never going to get it back. So it was like, despite the fact that they had been lying to me for years about, having made, because their story to me was that they made 2 Channel and that Hiroyuki was a figurehead and that he was just useful to them because they didn't speak Japanese and they needed a Japanese speaking figurehead to sell it to the Japanese public, right? That was their story. But just how easily when he got found out in a lie, just how shameless he was, and how he thought that I would be equally shameless to just be like, oh, well, he'll never get it back. Well, that's fine then. I guess I am going to happily allow, I guess that I'm just going to happily continue to do server administration and write software for your 5 channel.
They're like the cyber mafia, keeping it in the family.
Yeah, and so obviously they totally misjudged my character, because like as soon as I knew it was stolen, I was basically out. I just had to figure out how to get out. And they are a lot like a mafia. I mean, yeah, it was that, because I was scared. I didn't, before the shootings, I had this ridiculous belief that I could somehow lay low and kind of stay in the Philippines, but as long as Jim didn't think that like I was a threat to him, that maybe he wouldn't, attack me. And I felt like maybe we had kind of a shaky truce, where as long as I didn't publicly deride him or 8chan or anything, that they would just kind of ease off. But I'm just not that kind of person. And when the shootings happened, I felt like their administration of 8chan was so bad that I had a responsibility to, let people know that they're going to get more and more people killed. And, that just, I guess, broke the camel's back. And obviously, once I had said all that, when people asked me, because they found it odd that I somehow like had foresight. Like that's how one reporter put it. Like, why did I resign these few months before? Like, why did I cut ties with the Watkins family totally before the shootings? How did I know? And that's when I started to have to go into the Hiroyuki stuff. And yeah.
But it's also like I mean, you could just see the direction that it was headed based on how the administration was run. They weren't clamping down on any of this shit. And there's also, the other stuff. So it's like, it's not like I had some, crystal ball that I could see there was going to be shootings, but I can just see the direction of this is highly problematic and, potentially dangerous. So I'm out. Like,
I mean, for me, it was a little bit of a shock, but I guess, I'm just, I guess I was just too deeply in having used image boards for so long that I didn't think that, I didn't think that you could run an image board so badly that kind of thing happens, because obviously 4chan's poll is full of Nazis, but there are nobody planning a shooting and then posting their manifesto on there, and radicalizing people to that degree. So I was a bit shocked that happened. But I mean, obviously, when it happened, and the first reporter to really get me on the phone and ask me, to tell me, ask me to justify it, essentially being like, you're the one that created 8chan. Can you justify this? on free speech grounds, or should the site be shut down? I mean, I couldn't justify it at all. I said, yes, shut it down. They're terrible administrators. And obviously that became the quote that I became known for, shut it down.
Yeah, and fucking rightly so. Heaps glad it's
Right.
down.
Like, I don't feel like I can just avoid talking to a reporter, So,
yeah, that's bad, man.
We kind of talked about, Jim being, chaos possibly being a big motivation for him. But I'm just kind of wondering, you've known these guys very well. You've gone to war with them. I'm just wondering, what's your kind of assessment of each of their motivations? Or like, what's their kind of end game? Or what are they both after? Because I do think that there might be two slightly different motivations for the guys.
There are, yeah. So obviously they don't want just chaos, or like just chaos alone. They want chaos that they control.
And
So,
if it serves them.
right. They want chaos that serves them. So it's not like they would be happy with, I don't know, a socialist uprising with,
Right.
Bernie Sanders declaring it a national emergency that the minimum wage is so low, like something like that, right?
Yeah.
Which would cause a bunch of chaos. But it wouldn't be the chaos they want. They want the type of chaos that is fascist chaos. Like, I believe that both Jim and Ron are highly politically motivated, specifically motivated by their far-right politics.
Mm-hmm.
They differ a little bit in what they want to see happen. Jim Watkins is more of a Jim Watkins views himself as Larry Flint, and that's how he wants to be remembered. He wants to be remembered as this brave free speech warrior that defended free speech at all costs, and was controversial during his lifetime, but popular afterwards.
Like McAfee.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's actually, the crazy thing is Jim Watkins and John McAfee actually behave in very similar ways.
Really?
With the whole bribing officials overseas, living this international lifestyle, all the prostitutes, all the, all of the fact that he even, what am I looking for? Yeah, acquaints himself with criminals in the Philippines as protection, right, or wherever he is. I'm surprised, and I think that maybe COVID travel restrictions are the only reason that Jim is even still living in the United States. It's crazy to me that he's still, and maybe it's money, like they might be financially, I don't know how they could be though. I haven't quite worked out why he hasn't just been like, okay, well, I'm banned from the Philippines now. Let me just, hitch a ride to Thailand or hitch a ride to Indonesia, a similar country. He can do the same bullshit as before with all his money. Because, I don't know. Maybe he's thinking that he does have a lot of power with certain elements of American society. And it's quite possible that, he's being served well by certain, either militia groups or, white supremacist groups that are, doing a lot of his bidding up there in Northern California where he lives. The exact city where he goes to collect checks that people mail HN because he's been banned from so many payment processors that that's the only way he can receive donations. It's actually cash or checks that are mailed to his P.O. box in Davis, California, that he physically goes to pick up.
Yeah, because it's like, because, I'm sure you're aware, but, Ron's in Arizona at the moment.
Yeah, he is now. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got like printouts of like his Telegram channel, like shit posts from his followers, and he's reading them out to the Arizona Attorney General that just did the audit that proved Biden got 300 more votes.
Was he actually allowed in the Attorney General's office?
I don't know, but he said on the video.
No, because what I saw was that that video of him looking like an absolute clown,
standing
right outside by the sign. And he just, what the thing about Ron is, when he tries to, in video form, act as Q, he just sounds so insincere. Like, he sounds like he doesn't actually believe what he's saying. Like, he doesn't really talk with any genuine conviction, where he'll say, like, a very catchy slogan, like, you know, to do the right thing, you must indict, or something like that. But he doesn't raise his voice. Everything is just monotone. It's like he just lacks conviction. And what I saw in those videos is that he goes to this attorney general's office. He stands outside and makes that sign, and then he walks into the office. He gets given a little visitor sticker, like, you know, the average Joe, you know, and then they tell him to leave. Like, it was the least effective protest in history, even less effective than Laura Loomer, attaching herself to the doors of Twitter. Because when Loomer did that, at least some of the Twitter employees that are, like, you know, programmers, or even some involved in trust and safety, I remember, actually, you know, gave her some coffee and talked to her a little bit. Like, she got more out of them than Ron did. Like, Ron just got to talk to a secretary and then thrown out.
And in case you don't know, Jack, she handcuffed herself to the front of Twitter, but only to only one of the doors, so they could still open the door.
That's great.
But it was funny because, like, people thought that she was so laughable and pathetic that some of them, you know, who were doing their jobs at Twitter actually decided to go talk to her. There are some descriptions by Loomer of what happened, and I'm pretty sure even some videos that she took.
Yeah, there's a few. And because that's the thing, with Ron, is that, like, his whole persona out the front of in that video anyway just seemed like a really, really low energy IRL Q drop.
He probably sees it as like hypnotic, you know, monotone and hypnotic kind of.
Just like his martial arts videos.
Yeah, alluring, kind of strange. But again, like, all this kind of comes back to, like, what. So I think you guys are totally, well, I wouldn't know, but yeah, Jim's motives would probably be money, politics. But I mean, Ron's definitely seems like he's
well,
much
they're
more
both
interested
motivated by fascism. They want to see a fascist coup. They want to see fascist rule. They want to see, like, for example, I know for a fact that Ron really, really, really hates black people, and he's married to a Chinese national. And one of the stories he told me, and, you know, he lies so much that it's difficult to say if it's true, but I believe it just because it rings true. So I don't know if you know this, but Chinese citizens are doing a lot of business in Africa right now.
Yeah.
They are, like, their government is, let's just say, giving, like, a lot of, like, easy loans Chinese nationals to do business in Africa, and they are basically at the diplomatic level working with the staff of these African countries to relax their immigration rules and relax their, you know, as far as, like, Chinese people working in Africa, which would usually not be allowed.
Or, like, limits on, like, foreign ownership or something. Or...
Yeah. And a lot of those rules have been relaxed by basically diplomatic pressure and loans from the Chinese government. And so he told me that his wife, her family, has a lot of, like, benefited financially a lot from those businesses. And the way he put it to me was that, you know, the only problem that they face are that N-words are so, you know, you can imagine what comes next, that it's difficult to, like, train them, according to him, to do anything. And so he's super racist. And, you know, his family is super racist. So,
and that's just like some old school racism too. It's just,
like, it's so old school that it's literally, there's even an element of colonialism, right? It's just
exactly.
He views, even though he's half Asian, he doesn't view that as, like, negative. Like, his idea of race is all IQ based. So he views,
one of those
you know,
guys. Yep.
Yeah, he views Asians and white people and Jewish people as being like the top of the food chain in terms of racial superiority. And so he just wants to see an America that is run by a racist fascist regime. And so that, you know, that's his political hope for the world.
Yeah, I kind of got it as like Turner Diaries light. You know, like
Yeah,
not a full turn of
because
diaries, but just yeah.
I think he's jealous of his wife in the sense that, like, he thinks that the U.S. government should be doing what the Chinese government is doing in Africa. And he's kind of jealous that he can't use the money from Two Channel to do that same kind of thing because U.S., you know, American-run businesses aren't allowed to bribe foreign officials. He can get in a lot of trouble if it's found out. So he, yeah, what the sense I got from that conversation with him was that he, you know, if I'm trying to figure out his motives, he really wants to see a resurgence of fascism, colonialism, you know, and that kind of thing. And the way he would put it is, this is the only way that we can, you know, fight against China. And I might be wrong, but I feel like Trump at one time even said that, oh, well, you know, they're allowed to bribe, but we're not allowed to bribe. It's stupid. You know,
I'm
that
pretty
kind
sure
of thing,
100% he said that. Yeah.
Yeah, which Ron really liked.
And it's the same, you know, with Trump kind of talking to Putin about, you know, we don't have the same problem as you guys, you know, you guys don't have the same problem as us with fake news media in your country. You can just lock them up, but we got to deal with these, you know,
Yeah.
fucking journalists.
Yeah, like,
you know.
it's exactly like that. Ron really, like, envies authoritarian regimes and thinks that America would be better if it was run more like the Chinese communist state or the Russian state. More the Chinese, because he has a lot more familiarity with it. He lived in China for a lot of years. That's how he met his wife. So that's why it's crazy to me that the Q people think that he is some great enemy of China. I mean, he would, you know, he would love to see an America that is run essentially like China, you know, like in harmony with China.
I almost kind of thinking about it. I almost think that we could see a lot more of Ron in coming years because he's managed to become so influential, and I think that might be one of his motives is having power.
I mean, it blew my
being,
mind when Trump retweeted.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, Trump's been
that was
retweeting him.
bad.
Also, like his was featuring in Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium.
Until his lawyer cut him off after 3 minutes.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
right. But I mean, nonetheless, I mean, Mike Lindell, wacky as, but there is a very, very real chance that Trump could get back in because I don't know, whatever you think about Biden, he's pretty damn old, and I don't think he's as switched on as he once was, and Kamala Harris doesn't seem to be all that popular either. So if Trump does kind of triumph again in the next election...
Well, that's the end of the American Republic. I'm not going to allow this.
But I really wouldn't... Trump's the kind of guy that's like, you know, if you are all in, you know, you've got my approval. If you're loyal to me, you've got my approval. So I could imagine all this, you know, appearing at the Cyber Symposium and all that, as wacky as it seems to us. It'd just be like, Trump would be like noted. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Ron ended up being like a senior advisor to Trump.
But
yeah. I mean, I think in the next, God forbid, if Trump gets back in power, which would be very bad for me, you know, if Ron was in a position of power, which I agree with you. I think it's unlikely to happen. Yeah, but...
is that unlikely or likely? Am I just being ridiculous?
No, it's like there's no way that Ron would get a cabinet position, but maybe like Scavino or something.
Well, General Flynn would be the one with the cabinet position. I feel like the Democratic Party really has underestimated how close we got to a fascist regime, and the only thing that stopped it was that ultimately Trump doesn't love anything more than he loves Trump. And so the only reason that Trump was not willing to go all in and, like, you know, cultivate a loyal Secret Service agent who would actually physically shoot Mike Pence, something like that, you know, the only reason that he wasn't willing to do the kind of third world tactics that lead to a real coup, you know, like split off as much of the military as he can, that kind of thing, like the traditional coup tactics, is just because he was afraid of what would happen if he lost. That's it. But, you know, Adolf Hitler shot himself, and I feel like we're in a really precarious position. Trump almost causing a coup just shows that if some fascist gets into that office with the same kind of Hitler, personality where they're willing to give anything, including their own life for fascism, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Because that lame duck period really gives them. It's basically a period to do a coup in.
Yeah.
And they tried. They had a full memo, like whatever the Walker memo or whatever. Like they had like a 6-step plan, and then on top.
And Trump was just too cowardly to do it. But I really worry about the future of this country, and the Democrats are not sufficiently worried. And right now that they have power is the time that they could actually, do something about it. And probably what they have to do would be pretty radical to get, anybody on board.
They could start with enforcing the subpoenas, maybe, for the January 6th commission. That'd be good. Bannon and fucking Mark Meadows and them.
Well, start with actually putting some of these people on criminal trial.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why aren't they leaning on the Georgia officials to try Trump for those, election laws he broke? I feel like they underestimate what happened. And, the more that I look at it, and obviously I'm not an expert, but I kind of feel like it's undeniable that our Constitution isn't fit for purpose. It hasn't been changed in so long that we're still thinking about like horse carriages in terms of, presidential things. And our weird fetishization of this document is going to be our undoing, because people like Trump, uber fascists like him, do not care about law or, in fascist regimes, the Constitution is just like their constitutions are just partial guarantees. Like they just don't really have any meaning because that the regime has their own interpretation, which is totally counter to what the words say. And I feel like the Democrats right now actually have the power to make sweeping changes, but they're not even willing to, get rid of the filibuster, which isn't even in the fucking Constitution. I mean,
that was a recent thing, wasn't it? Wasn't that like in the 30s or 40s they put the filibuster in?
Yeah. Basically, it's just a gentleman's agreement in the Senate, and that's what it is. And they're not willing to do even the most minor of changes because they have this weird fetishization of the American process that their enemies going to do. And I feel like it's going to be our undoing. I feel like if they actually wanted to guarantee peace and to guarantee that there won't be a second coup, or that there won't, a successful coup rather, or that there won't be, a revolutionary war, is they have to come up with some kind of devolution or something like that, as has been done in other countries. And I feel like if you got all of the states to kind of agree to a convention that would set up a more European Union-like system, except with a combined army, that would lead to a lot more peace. It would suck, obviously, for people that live in, the South and rural states.
I was going to say, because of the how much money they get. Like they get heavily subsidized by New York and California, and places like West Virginia would probably cease to exist. I mean,
Well, I'm just saying that obviously in terms of like devolution, that's the peaceful way to do this.
Yeah,
you would have a combined budget for the army and for other things that are kind of agreed, like in the EU, like in the EU. The poor states receive money from the rich states, and that I honestly don't see a way that we maintain peace without converting to an EU-like system, because we are so fucked right now.
I saw a poll the other day that was saying that it was like, I think 30% of Democrats that were polled said that they were up for, seceding, and I don't know, maybe 60% of Republicans, something like that. Like it was not a small number of people that said they'd be down to secede.
But the thing is, instead of secession, radically overhauling the Constitution would help a lot, I feel. Because that way you would still have a combined army. You wouldn't have like a fucking war. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if this happens violently, it's going to be terrible for everybody in the country. If you have like a segment of the army fighting another segment of the army, and if you have like confusion as to who the actual president, I think that the only thing that we have to thank for the fact that didn't happen is Trump's narcissism. Like he just didn't want to die. Like if he lost. But I'm really worried. I think we're actually in a worse position than ever before, and I think that the Democrats are totally fucking clueless about where we're heading and what's going to happen, because the Americans always have this ridiculous notion that every politician is just totally in love with the idea of peaceful transfers of power. Clearly Trump isn't, and he is cultivating a section of the GOP that doesn't believe that we can carry out fair elections unless the GOP wins. So if they're ever in office again, I don't know how we survive how we are right now, because they certainly aren't going to be afraid of the idea of amending the Constitution. And because it's based on a number of states for a constitutional convention, and there are so many rural states, they could easily, end up with a very fascist system. And now that we're holding the cards, which we might not be for long, we may as well try to bring about peace through some kind of devolution, give them, the power to do what they want in their states, as long as they're, paying certain taxes to the federal government, and just radically shrink the size of the federal government. And, it sucks. I really wish that didn't have to be, but there's so little holding us together that I really don't see how we avoid a war in this century.
Fred, every right-winger's worst nightmare, it would sound. But it is like, it is kind of, I really don't want to be like hyperbolic or anything, but it does seem that, I kind of thought Q would go away when Trump was out. And in a way, I guess, to a large extent, it has. Censorship has been a huge part of that, which, I'm
See, Q, but the thing is, like, the mythos of Q and the core beliefs of Q have gone away, but the desire among the far right for a fascist coup is still fucking there.
That's what I mean. Like, the damage is done.
Yeah.
The
just
seeds
the way
have been,
that they want to carry it out is different.
Exactly. So, and now we're kind of seeing it dribble over. We're seeing it a lot here in Australia. I think you guys definitely would have had a similar experience. But, the whole COVID-19 restrictions, the vaccination, we're just in the process of getting basically a forced mandate. A lot of employers are forcing their employees to be mandated. And now everyone is digging their heels in. Look, there's definitely arguments for both sides. Undoubtedly, it's not cut and dry, but the distrust is there. Like this idea that the tyranny.
Feel that.
Yeah.
I really feel that we can't agree on anything in this country anymore, and that the only way, because I look at the European Union, and I see a system that's working way better than our system. I see, I don't think that we should copy everything about it. Like, for example, I don't think that you should be able to leave. So there would be no possibility of like a Brexit, in the system that I'm
Oh,
thinking
yeah,
about.
yeah. I didn't know what you meant by leave. I was like, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
do they get locked into the country? Or
No. Like, obviously, like, I don't think that whatever federal system is set up to replace the one that we have now, I don't think that that system should allow people to leave like the EU did. But I just don't know how our system survives when people don't feel like they feel a lot more loyalty to the Republican Party and its beliefs than to America. And nobody agrees on what America is. You know, you have people on one side that say America is justice and equality for all under the law. And then you have people on the other side that say um, America is the, white inhabitants of this land and it's about blood and soil. How do you reconcile those two things?
it's incredibly difficult. And I know
It can't be done.
Yeah. Well, and it's like there's so many different elements that, I guess like the kind of echo chambers that people live in where that shit's constantly reinforced
Mm-hmm.
and like, and on the Republican side, like, it seems like very kind of shallow and superficial to me, most of the ways that they celebrate patriotism.
I know, but when you look at these militia members and see that they're very much willing to die for, secession. Like they all want secession. And
Mhm.
I don't know how we prevent that. I mean, because I really only see like two scenarios. Either by some miracle the Democrats are able to stay in power. There are no massive questions about like who is actually the president, right? And somehow they're just able to keep winning elections, which is totally unheard of in American society. That one power party is just going to hold power forever. So, but let's say it happens, due to demographics, whatever, and maybe as the GOP continues to lose and lose and lose, they kind of, die off like on national politics, the level of national politics, and then basically the fight becomes between a splintered Democratic Party. Like I've seen this as a possible scenario, at the level of national politics. But the issue is still that on the level of state politics, the GOP is going to be tremendously powerful in states like Louisiana and Alabama and
Texas
Ohio,
and Florida, man. Like,
Florida, yes, of course. Yeah.
And you see
And I
what
just
they're
don't
doing.
know.
Oh,
I don't know how we prevent, 3%ers or whoever in these states deciding that this is their moment and, they're going to secede. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but in a lot of states right now, some of the like rural counties in California are a great example where they're like refusing to follow state gun law.
yeah, I saw
And,
that.
And another thing that I notice is I view it as a good thing that marijuana has become so legalized, but I also view it as really ominous that we're all breaking the law. Even states are breaking the law as regards marijuana, and nothing is happening because the federal government feels that, that national security would be at risk if they actually tried to enforce it, because people would suddenly become a lot less supportive of the idea of having a federal government.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So I view a lot of that as like, the federal government's their legitimacy is really in question, and there are so many laws that they actually can't enforce because it would be so unpopular that their legitimacy would go into the toilet. And so I don't know how we survive as a unified nation without a totally different system.
Well, Fred, you were kind of talking before about, just what led up to this is how divided everyone's become. And, it's easily arguable that so much of that has been because of social media. Not necessarily,
But could that
the
be
narrative's
undone?
always been the mainstream media are telling lies, but now it's like, it's just
Right.
the social media, And, you have started a social media platform effectively with 8chan, and you've fought really hard to take down a website that was a symbol for many as a free speech absolutist website. So what do you think? I mean, everything has changed so quickly with COVID. So now what do you think about the internet as it's known now? I don't know whether we're getting the same internet as you guys in America, but my last episode of my podcast got pulled down from YouTube. I mean, I'm not having a big old whinge. I didn't lose any money from it or anything, but everything that I said, we're talking about COVID stuff, it was very much in line with the medical guidelines, but because I was just talking about it, it got pulled.
Right.
And we're just seeing this more and more, and this is what everyone's kind of warned us about, and now it's kind of happening. Like, what do you think about the online?
One thing I worry about is that radicalization, once done, is not easily undone at a mass level. And I feel like all of the damage that was done in terms of radicalization between
with QAnon or just
2013,
everything?
No, everything.
Yeah.
Anti-vaccine, everything. QAnon, but QAnon is like more of a flash in the pan compared to, all of the anti-vaccine stuff.
Sure.
All of the anti-election, all of the racist stuff, the belief in white genocide. These are powerful beliefs that people teach to their children in the same way as religions. And it's true that, these social media companies are finally tackling it. But first of all, there's no legal requirement. It's all just consensus of large companies right now. And we can see that the people that are already radicalized are very willing to go to another platform like BitChute or Odyssey or that would be ODYSEE or Gab, for example, and Telegram. Look how many fucking followers Ian Watkins has on Telegram.
Yeah, it's exploded.
And so
It's crazy.
We are not focused enough on the fact that these alternative, some people call them alt tech, right? Platforms are as popular as they are. And we only put pressure on, the companies that pressure actually works on. So it just doesn't seem to me like radicalization can be undone. And so what I've said to you earlier is kind of the thoughts of somebody who has given up, right, on the idea that radicalization can be undone, and is just thinking about, okay, well, given the fact that my country is full of people that are totally radicalized and that I don't think I can talk any sense into, how do I maintain peace? That's kind of my view, but I could be wrong. I just feel like I have a lot of experience with the internet and internet communities, and I kind of feel like once somebody is really as deep into it as a lot of the believers in QAnon are, they are never going to, on a large scale, you'll have occasionally one or two that will come out with like a feel-good story, broken free of that. And I applaud them. I think that that's really, good that they were able to realize the bullshit and what they're being told and return to consensus reality. But I feel like consensus reality is never coming back, and we have to figure out what to do about that.
So you kind of think that a lot of these big tech platforms taking down and completely...
I think it's too late.
But do you think this is... do you think it's justified in kind of what they're doing, though? Like, because I think everyone does kind of agree that there should be some kind of regulation of this misinformation, but it doesn't really appear that anyone has a very good answer for it, because now we're just seeing conversations getting shut down on monopolized
well, no, it's
platforms.
Not just it makes, ironically, a lot of it causes the exact opposite of what they want.
And feeds back into the conspiracy.
It feeds back into the conspiracy theories, because the very fact that you, who are talking about COVID, and I mean, I believe that you weren't saying anything that was not in agreement with what the beliefs of the WHO are.
My views are very vanilla.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. But the fact that even you were censored means that the conspiracy theory that it's not possible to talk about COVID on YouTube is correct.
Yeah, exactly.
that they don't want us, like, the way that they would put it. They, in italics, don't want us talking about COVID. Well, that's right. They don't. So it,
but it's dominating our life.
It's
That's
not
the thing that's so frustrating is this issue. We're all been in lockdown for months, so this issue is forced in our faces every single day of our lives. There's nothing else to talk about, and then to censor that is such a
right. And then you censor somebody for doing it, and then they look into why they were censored, and you have all of these voices on, just like I was saying, BitChute, Gab, Telegram, telling them why they were censored. Their reasons are total bullshit, and really it only has to do with PR and, Facebook's idea of shareholder value. But it doesn't matter to, the people that were censored and what they're going to believe. They're going to believe in the most interesting, outlandish story that's told. And, I feel like, no, it isn't justified what's being done. And I don't know what we do, because clearly big tech is a radicalization engine, but at the same time, a controlled big tech is a radicalization engine, right?
And it gets like
it's so screwed.
And it also has become, like, as far as I'm concerned, a lot more problematic because of how slick the people that are trying to pull in, pull in people into their conspiracy communities, how good they've gotten at manipulate.
Do you remember the documentary that was called Plandemic?
Yes.
Never saw it, but yes.
As part of their documentary release, they already had a plan and everything set up for when it got pulled.
Right.
Just you make it knowing that they're going to pull it, and then you get like all these like donations and like, we're going to make another one, and we're going to put it like
they
live.
They had a pre-recorded video to put out as soon as they got pulled.
They're getting really fucking good at this. And it's like, and a lot of the anti-vax stuff that you see as well has just it's gotten really, really slick.
That's kind of what I'm so interested in, is like many people with this anti-vax stuff have some concerns, and they're so frustrated that they're getting all lumped into this kind of conspiracy basket, which I could understand how frustrating that would be if you're on the other side and you don't see yourself that way. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I'm really interested in is who are the people that are kind of guiding the narrative or platforming this? So, like, we've got a freedom movement that's been organised by someone who rubs shoulders with the Proud Boys. We've got these new far-right people reporting who are giving the only real voice that are, like, if you look into them, they're very problematic right-wing people.
Exactly.
So that's skewing the narrative because no one's doing a good job.
Ron Watkins' fans, by and large, do not have the racist beliefs that he has towards black people. You know? Like, they, by and large, don't believe in the race and IQ conspiracy theory, but they are using the issues that they do agree on and making it so that people very frustrated for, let's say vaccines, very frustrated about vaccines, are getting all their content from these people. And so gradually, people like Ghost Ezra can start convincing them on the other elements of their belief system.
And it's been done like that.
They had no interest in.
It's been done like that by a lot of conspiracy theorists for years. Like, I talk about Alex Jones a bit because I use him as a kind of, it's how I gauge the kind of temperature of the conspiracy community is through Alex. But, like he got a lot of people on board just through questioning 9/11 and being kind of anti-Bush, and being like anti-Cheney at the time. And so like young, like men like myself at the time who were very anti the Iraq war and, the levels of spying that came out of 9/11, we're like, well, maybe we got like an ally here. Like, he seems to be anti-war, anti-Bush, and like he doesn't seem to be like a racist. But then it kind of turns out that
maybe one of the answers for what to do can also be seen through Alex Jones, because the lawsuit against him for his support of the
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook conspiracy theory, exactly, has actually led to a lot of consequences for him and is going to lead to him either having to pay a huge judgment or evading that judgment and losing, a lot of his business in the process due to court forfeiture. And so obviously he can't be thrown in jail for a civil lawsuit, but he can still lose a lot of money and all of his, on paper assets. So I feel like a lot of the politicians and people that were legitimately wronged by the Q conspiracy believers and people like Ron Watkins, they view themselves as above suing for defamation for things like this. But that's actually something that they could do to help and should probably be pressured to do. Like, it shouldn't just be the responsibility of that voting machine Dominion corporation, the voting machine producer, to sue a lot of these people for defamation. Like, I don't know why the Clintons, for example, don't set up that same kind of campaign. It really could help because a lot of these grifters have made verifiably defamatory statements knowing that they're false. And even though the Clintons are public figures, the cases are so airtight that I think they're at least worth attempting. And, I believe that in the next few years, we're going to see, as more court forfeitures happen against Alex Jones, his influence wane because the lawyers there are very dedicated to making sure that they, get all of his assets. And that is actually one of the ways to fight things like this.
But
And,
it plays into his thing as well, though, don't you reckon, Fred? Because, he would say that if he was getting successfully, taken down by the Clintons, that it just proves that everything that he said has been right. I mean, it would definitely, fuck up his money, which I'm all about.
It would play to his audience, but it also would stop somebody like him who is very dangerous and has no interest in the truth from growing that audience.
That's true.
And I think one thing we have to consider is whether we're so scared of playing to his audience that we are just turning a blind eye to the fact that he's growing that audience. And, it might be all right to play to his audience if doing so can stop that audience from expanding. I mean, I don't know, but I feel like given how few things we've seen that work, and this is basically the only thing that's worked, is directly challenging them for defamation in a civil court. And, people that were wronged and had very defamatory statements posted by them, shouldn't see themselves as above suing, I think.
Fred,
I agree,
we'll wrap it up in a sec, but I did just want to ask you, when John McAfee died, a big Q came up on his Instagram post just after he died. And now his Telegram pages have been, they're just straight up QAnon talking points. Where we go one, we go all, or whatever, posted. Do you have any insight? Because he didn't seem to be anyway QAnon inclined when he was alive. Do you have any insight or inkling as to who might be behind this, making McAfee this QAnon figure these days? I'm not sure if you're even familiar with it.
I'm familiar, and I've seen the big Q that was there. I don't use Instagram that much, so I only saw a screenshot that was posted to Twitter. But if I had to guess what happened there was, obviously McAfee was in prison, right? So he couldn't maintain his accounts on his own. And he needed to have some kind of ally on the outside. And do you remember when he ran for president as the Libertarian Party? So I think at that time he came into contact with a lot of social media managers who obviously are far-right individuals. And I think that those people are the ones running his accounts now. The ones that helped him come up with his Libertarian Party platform. Obviously, when he was alive, he wouldn't have approved any of the, Q posts and stuff that they wanted to make. But now that he is deceased, he doesn't have a say. So
It's just super
I feel
convenient
like-
for them, isn't it?
it is super convenient for them. Yeah, I feel like he essentially accounts like John McAfee's are viewed as kind of a currency in their world. And,
Right.
It's interesting. We began this discussion talking about how Flat Earth is always trying to get sports stars and rappers, right?
Yeah.
On their side. And it's that same kind of thing where John McAfee's account is a boon to them, and it's something they would really seek after. So even if the original people that were involved in that Libertarian Party campaign did not, aren't in charge of it now, they would realize that that's a tradable asset, essentially. And some of these Q, supporters are very wealthy, like Jim Watkins. So obviously I don't know who's posting as McAfee, but it wouldn't surprise me if they, decided to use that account to trumpet beliefs that they had, but which McAfee wouldn't have allowed them to express under his name when he was alive.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, definitely
heaps of
seems
sense.
like that way. Definitely. And there's just no convincing the people who are already signed up to the cause, I guess. But whatever.
We try, but
Yeah.
it's like, it very quickly runs into the fact, and this is a very inconvenient fact, because you have a lot of grifters on the other side who are like, support my organization. I'm in de-radicalization. And, they try to stir up drama by saying, like, all of these journalists and all these podcasters benefit from the existence of Q, and so they're not really interested in fighting Q and de-radicalization, but I am.
Fucking stewing on, eh?
Yeah, StuAnon is what I'm talking about right now. The StuAnon / BlueAnon belief system. The unfortunate reality that they never want to confront is that there is no method of de-radicalization that has proven even effective at the individual level, much less the broad societal level. And the government puts a lot of money into de-radicalization efforts. And so far, the research has not been, convincing. Trying to, the first thing that was thought of in the 70s with the cult members is forcible de-radicalization. So actually kidnapping them, usually at the behest of their parents, and trying to do a forcible de-radicalization. Obviously that did not work and, was illegal. And a lot of these organizations got in trouble. And so they've come up with a whole slew of de-radicalization methods. And I'm very wary of people that come out and make huge promises about them or their organization's ability to de-radicalize when the proof isn't there. And I'm not saying don't try, but I am saying that whenever there's a problem in society, people benefit financially from being very confident that they're the only ones that can solve it. And, it isn't the role of journalists or activists to de-radicalize. It's not something that we know how to do. I'm a computer programmer. I definitely don't know how to make your grandma stop believing in QAnon as much as I would like to know, and I feel like there's a false narrative that, because journalists aren't themselves involved in de-radicalization, that they don't care or whatever. I feel like definitely we need to be putting more focus on de-radicalization, but as I told you earlier, I am pretty let's just say that I'm pretty depressed about the chances of any of it working, especially any of the legal methods working.
Yeah, and it's such a Trumpian notion that in itself, like the eye alone can fix it type of thing. Mm-hmm. Like that's really Trumpy thinking.
But yet there are so many organizations that basically say exactly that. Only we can fix it,
And they're different problems, like some, they're all there for, I mean, a lot of them I think are there to find some kind of community and validation, and also, an outlet for their grievances that they can't understand, or
Right.
trying to find meaning there. But yeah, it's far more complex than, you know, some one size fits all thing, I'd imagine anyway.
Well, hey, was there anything in the documentary that was dying to be said that just wasn't able to make the cut, or is there any kind of just wacky QAnon news that is kind of happening now that is like an after residual effect that is just like and who is QAnon? Maybe either one of you could kind of go into that.
Oh, well, as far as wacky QAnon news goes, I feel like the documentary was very good and very broad, but it never touched on the fact that, just like with Bitcoin, when there were a lot of people who very much wanted to be recognized as Satoshi Nakamoto and were willing to falsify evidence, lie, and set up a grift where the entire grift is based on the fact that they say that they're Satoshi. That also exists in Q. None of the candidates who are just dying for anybody to recognize them as Q were brought up, and so they are a crazy breed. The two main ones that I'm thinking about are Austin Steinbart and Lisa Clapier maybe. They both are just really, really, really want somebody to recognize them as Q. Steinbart was that guy that took a photo of himself in a data center, and then Clapier is she is. Somebody on my Twitter called her Woo-anon, and I think that's a very description for her, because she believes in Reiki and she's a light worker, like that kind of alien dimensions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, just new ager, existential new ager, esoteric.
Yeah.
New ager.
I feel like that was something that probably he could have touched on, is just that there's obviously he was trying to figure out who Q actually was. So he didn't want to go into these wacky grifts of people that are dying to be recognized as Q but aren't. But that was something they could have mentioned. As far as who QAnon is, so obviously putting anon at the end of a word is a very funny way to describe something that's QAnon-like but not QAnon. So right. I would say that using the anon suffix can pretty much be applied to any movement that is constantly talking about how justice is coming, that is always talking about the U.S. federal law that defines treason, that is always just I mean, I even saw one of their tweets today that even included the word boom. It really reminded me of that Q drop that's just boom, 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 boom. I mean, this whole, because it's a very viral thing to do. It's something that people want to believe, that the system is hot on the tails of all of these evildoers, and they're all just going to be, bundled up and thrown into prison. But we know that that's not the case, and I feel like people have such fucking short memories, because that was exactly what people were thinking about the Mueller report. I feel like, for example, what's going on right now with the January 6th Commission in Congress. I feel like that is going to be a disappointment on par with the Mueller report, because it's just going to be a whole lot of talking and a whole lot of nothing, because I feel like our system, and people don't want to accept this, is very, very incoherent and not powerful at the end of the day. And but QAnon is essentially somebody who is constantly roping people along on Twitter with the belief that any day now, Ron and Jim and a whole bunch of others, including myself, funny enough, are going to be just in the same kind of thing, like a day of justice, right? Are all just going to be tried in a federal court and jailed. As much as I'd like to see some of that happen, I think that it's just another attack on consensus reality, where the difficult truth that nothing is happening, and it causes people to think that they can just sit back when they can't.
I think that's fucking spot on. And you see what I like really struggled with the QAnon thing just in relation to you is I just didn't get it. It's like I've been paying attention to QAnon for
Well, it's much like Q in that the evidence is so ridiculous. Like, for example, one of the pieces of QAnon evidence is the fact that I answered a question on Quora about a Filipino religion named Iglesia Ni Cristo. And I didn't support this religion. I'm not a member. I didn't, say anything good about it. I just said, oh, yeah, this religion exists in the Philippines. It's the third or largest one. And here's what they believe about Christmas. I believe that the only reason I wrote the answer was because I was trying to figure it out myself. And I came on that Quora page and it didn't have a good answer. So I wrote one. But they use that to say, oh, so Fred was interested in Iglesia Ni Cristo, and maybe he's a member. Right? I mean, I believe that QAnon himself, my name for Jim Stewartson, believes that I'm a member, right? And I'm somehow, for some reason, hiding it. And he has all
what
these
does that
wacky
prove,
beliefs.
though? What is that supposed to
I don't
prove?
know. Oh, well, because Lisa Clapier, one of the people who really wants people to believe she's Q, and also a friend of, God, what the hell is his name? Schoenberger, yeah, who is the guy that Stu thinks is Q, yeah. So,
Man, that must be the weirdest feeling, having people
I know,
creating
it's
conspiracies about you. You're at the center of so many of these conspiracies.
Yeah, I'm at the center of a lot. One of them is just the fact that my surname is Brennan, which is one of the most common surnames in the U.S. But they think that means I'm related to the CIA director.
Yeah, like John Brennan, the CIA director, who's not the CIA director anymore, and is like,
he's not anymore, but they obviously still think that he has power in the deep state.
But he's like number one target of the right wing, and you're supposed to be in bed with him in the deep state.
A lot of surname stuff is very common in conspiracy theories, like the fact that, like that's why they all hate Mike Rothschild, just because of his surname.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It really, when it comes to kind of, anti-Q conspiracy theories can be just as ridiculous as pro-Q, because, I feel like there's something about these very, fact-free, as I would call them, conspiracy theories that are based on, and all it's really based on is drawing connections. Yeah. So you say, okay, this person was in the Philippines when this person was in the Philippines. Therefore, they're involved in Q, right? And that kind of thinking, is appealing to a lot of people, even though obviously it doesn't stand up to any scrutiny. I feel like a lot of people just don't understand what a journalistic standard of evidence is, and they don't agree with it. They think that connections, so-called, are more valuable than they actually are.
Yeah.
Let's just say that they would make very poor lawyers.
Well, it's just barely even circumstantial. Like, does that even reach the level of being circumstantial? It's just complete conjecture.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But circumstantial evidence in a court, the bar is a lot higher. But it's just ridiculous that, these people are just so constantly putting out content. And really, just like you, it's all about going viral, And one of them was banned recently, Bad Company, with 2 Ds.
I saw that today.
BADD. Yeah, that just happened today.
R.I.P.
And it's because they're basically the same tactics as Q. It's just on the other side, and it's just as dangerous because they have really whipped up a lot of hatred against Russians and anybody that is Eastern European. Like, anybody with a Russian surname among these people is just automatically suspect.
Right.
And I find that to be, like, sometimes even shockingly racist. But anyway.
Yeah. Far out.
Fred, I'd say we've had a good long chat.
Yeah,
oh, man.
Yeah, Fred, I was just about to wrap it up, but thank you so much for making the time, buddy. Been watching you from afar.
Yeah, no problem.
Great to talk. You're awesome. You're such an interesting guy.
Yeah, Fred.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing it. It was an absolute pleasure. And I wanted to just ask quickly before we end, like, how is your dog Hitomi? How's she going?
Oh, she's great. Yeah. I live in New Jersey now, Atlantic City. And yeah, she loves it here. We've kind of, settled into a new routine. It's a very different routine. Obviously I have no, further contact with my ex-wife, but other than that, we're still alive. We're making it out here, but I'm just blessed that I was able to escape the Philippines and kind of, whatever I can do in these, what I view pretty ominously to be my final years, to help is what I'll do. Yeah.
A fucking legend, man.
Fred, how can people reach out
Thanks
to
so
you
much.
if you even want that? And is there anything you want to plug?
You can follow me on Twitter, @fr_Brennan. I don't make money from my tweets. I don't accept donations or anything like that. I feel like it allows me to be more honest, and also I feel like I like the fact that I've always had, like, my main love in life has always been computer programming, and that's never going to change. So I like being a computer programmer for most of my time, and so that's why my personal website is mostly related to the fonts that I work on and the software that I work on. That's dba.gg. Yeah,
Awesome.
That's about it.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks so much, Fred, man. Really good to chat to you.
Yeah, see you, buddy. And
Okay, cool.
thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.